Okay, guys, it is Coronagate day 72, and we are kind of running up to Pentecost, which is the time in which the church celebrates the coming of the Holy Spirit. I've got someone who I was going to have live with me on StreamYard, a guy called Barney, a guy who spent most of his adult life in the Jesus Army, which is a Christian community, but I couldn't do that. So I've actually got him on the phone. Barney, can you say hello? Okay, Barney. So let me just run through a few things, guys, and then I'm going to bring Barney in. Let me just tell you about my introduction to the Jesus Army way back when. And Barney, you can jump in because I don't even know if you know half of this stuff. I can't believe we've got the streaming thing, but I'm on the phone. But anyway, that's okay. That's just how we roll at Hope Church Lancaster. Guys, as well, if you've got any questions or comments, make sure you stick them in the comment section. Melissa, hello, I can see that you're watching. When I was about 6 years old, my parents as teenagers had something of a Christian conversion. They never really followed it through, but at one point when we were moving from England to Scotland, I was about 6 years old at the time, 7 years old. I've got a twin brother, big sister. My little brother wasn't there. We moved into a farm for a few weeks called Harvest Farm, which was in Northampton. It was run by a guy called Pete Matacola, or Pete Just, and it was a Jesus Army farm. So we were there for a few weeks. I was like, man, these guys are weird. Hey, Matt Parker. I'm like, these guys are a bit weird, man. They are really big on Jesus, and they sing a lot. And but it was really, really cool. And I remember, the Matacola kids won't remember this, but I remember being with the Matacola kids and trying to dig a swimming pool, and we just ended up digging a big hole, filling it full of water, and it was just covered in mud. I remember going to New Creation Farm, which is one of the Jesus Army farms, and picking apples. Hey, JJ. So I remember that. And then I went off, hey, Nanette. Then I went off and never heard much or anything like that about the Jesus Army. And then in my teenage years, I was about 17 at the time, me and my twin brother got saved, and my parents had split up. I wasn't talking to my dad. And it turns out that just literally after we got saved, like very, very soon, hey, Bill DeMay, very soon after we got saved, my dad made contact with us, and he was living in a Jesus Army house in Coventry called Promise. So if there's any Jesus Army guys watching, guys, give us a shout. Steve Brand New, that was my virtue name back then. And just to explain to my guys, it's because in Scotland, if something's cool, you go, it's brand new, by the way. And I used to speak with a little bit of a Scottish twang. Anyway, so about a week after I got saved, me and my twin brother and my sister and a bunch of my mates, they used to call us the Kilmarnock Six because we all went from Kilmarnock. We went down there and we got baptized with the Jesus Army. And then I kind of kept a bit of a friendship with them, read the book Fire in Our Hearts, which is their story. I read that about 4 times. I never read a book more than once. And then in the armed forces, I kind of lost my way. And then I went and I did a training year with the Jesus Army. I never joined them formally, but always had an identification with them. And then when I was at Bible college, I wrote an essay about the Jesus Army because it was quite a sociological wonder. There were over 50% under the age of 40 and 50% male, which is quite a rare thing in church circles. And yeah, so always had this kind of very close kind of affinity with them. They have their own homes, they have their own businesses, or they did, because a few years ago, because of issues within the past, and I'm going to let Barney talk about that because I love them and I don't want to say anything. You know, I want to be a truth teller, but you know, I also love them and respect them and have been informed by them. So that's kind of my experience of the Jesus Army. Also, when it comes to other Christian communities, I did a pilgrimage to Iona, which is a Christian community in Scotland, and have always secretly not only been an Elvis Presley fan, but always been a fan of Taizé, which is a kind of a community in France, which is really big into Gregorian chants, which some of my guys will be like, You're kidding. Yes, no, seriously. I love Teze. So, Barney, we've got you on the phone. Barney, when did you first get involved with the Jesus Army or with Christian community?
Yeah, sorry I can't. Sorry you can't see me. Trouble with the technology. Yeah, I got involved in the mid-70s. I went along to the chapel at Bugbrook because one of my friends, who I knew when I was a teenager, he'd joined the community, and he'd invited some of us up to give it the once over and go to the chapel in Bugbrook. Yes. 1974, I think it was.
So 1974. So some of these guys don't know the history. Basically, there was a traditional village Baptist church called Bugbrook Baptist Church. It'd been going for like maybe 150 years or whatever. But then in 1969, there was a group of people who began to seek the power of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit fell. There was something of a revival in a very small village. A number of people were converted and saved, and the church not only wanted to experience the power as individual people, but they wanted to experience the power as a people. And one of the things that led into, and it was actually a lot of kind of community experiments, secular and Christian, were happening at this time. This led them into buying community homes and community businesses, and I think that started in the early 70s. So that would have been in the early days of the movement, Barney. So what was your church background, and what did you think about these crazy people who wanted to live together?
Well, I come from an Anglican background. My dad was a vicar, and I'd a couple of years earlier I'd been on a holiday, a Christian holiday with some friends, and we'd had this experience of the Holy Spirit. And so I was kind of, on the one hand, I was really looking for more. On the other hand, I wasn't really maintaining a holy life, to be totally honest. So I wanted to move on, but I was finding that I was struggling. I was struggling with sin in various ways.
How old were you?
20. And when I first went, I was about 22. When I finally joined the community, I was 23 in 1976.
Wow. And what did your mum and dad think about?
They were not very happy about it, to be totally honest. It was because there were a lot of things around at the time, with various sort of like weird religious things, and they thought, well, this is one of them. I've joined this cult. I've moved in with them. I've given all my money away. They weren't happy about it for quite a long time, actually. It took a few years before they accepted what I'd done.
Guys, as well, can you just stick in the comment section? Can you hear Barney okay? Because this is a bit of an experiment because of my inability to get Barney onto the stream with us. So your parents weren't happy. You move into a Christian community. So it's quite formational at this time. So what is happening? What is different? Was it just the hall that they had bought at this time, New Creation Hall, or have they a few community houses at this point?
No, we lived I went into a terrace house in Northampton, and a lot of the guys living there. It was a guy's house,
mm-hmm.
So there was about 15 guys, and then there was a couple of married couples who sort of looked after things, and there was this what they called a sister's house on the next street. So and it was quite these guys were quite hippified. I came from a conventional middle class background, you know, and some of these guys I was knocking around with had done all sorts. Yeah, so for me it was doubly strange because I was well out of my comfort zone, and there was no. Latterly, the church developed a lot of structures. There was very few structures apart from the fact that you went to a lot of meetings at the chapel, and well, I think we just got the farm. So before I got a job, I just went up and worked on the farm.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So you're in your early 20s. Your parents think that you're a bit weird and that you've joined some kind of weirdo cult. You're living in a terrace house with ex-bikers and ex-hippies. I think in the early days they reached a lot of bikers and hippies, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. I shared a room with this guy. He'd done everything, you know, taking loads of drugs, and you know, he was. I mean, he was a lovely bloke. He's passed away now, but
who was it? Because I know
Hmm?
some of these guys. I've known these guys. So who was it? Would I know them?
I don't know. His name was Ronnie Salter.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, he was a fair bit older than me, probably in his mid-30s. Yeah.
So what are you learning as a person, and what are you learning as a believer? You know, obviously, like at Pentecost, we always read Acts chapter 2, and then sometimes we read Acts chapter 4 about, having all things in common. So yeah, what are you learning? What's going through your mind? What's going through your spirit? You know, how are you growing? What's driving you mental about living with those people?
It's pretty challenging. It's pretty it's a culture shock, and you know, I just lived in this first house for 11 months,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a steep learning curve. And I was a babe in the wood. You know, I've been living with my mum and dad. I was sort of young for my age as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was an incredibly steep learning curve. I just felt that God had called me to do it, you know, and I still believe in that call, actually. Whatever's happened in the future.
I mean, I'm going back on my own question. What are you learning? Like theologically, what are you learning about yourself? What are you learning about other people? What are you learning about the church? Because pretty much, I mean, like one of the shocks that I had, which I thought was brilliant, one of the shocks that I had was that the Jesus Army, it was very much about real life. So there was fasting and there was prayer, but I remember sometimes the brothers getting disciplined because they didn't shower regularly or brush their teeth regularly or make their bed or get up at a half decent time. And I was like, oh, wow, like they actually think that Christianity should affect everything. And I was like, wow, because it should. But I mean, what were you learning?
Oh, well, sort of those first few months, I think I was just learning to live with other people. When I left there, I went to another house in the country called Sheepfold, and the guy that you mentioned, Pete Maticola,
yeah.
He was he lived there, and yeah, it was a discipleship based lifestyle, and so I remember him, taking me out for a walk. You know, he was somebody. I remember him talking to me about not just not just giving in to my emotions. Over the years, it was, over the years, I remember specific times when he particularly spoke to me about things. You know, he talked to me sometimes about my attitudes to other people, from the other people. I mean, I learned the work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of, it was okay to wear yourself out if you were serving. And in terms of
which is quite rare today. I'm keeping an eye on the time actually, because this could quite possibly be the longest vlog that we've done. Some of you guys are going to catch up later. You know, like it is completely contrary to a lot of Christian understanding, in which, you know, it's very kind of low commitment. You kind of do what you can, do what you're comfortable with, do what you're good at. You know, in fact, I hear all the time, I've been to numerous leadership conferences where they're like, do what you're good at and don't do what you're bad at, and just play yourself to your giftings and your strengths, which in one regard, that is true. But in another regard, it means that there are whole areas of your life in which you just don't grow, you know? So, you know, yeah. So I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but
yeah, I can sort of how I would put it into words is what's happened in my, if I hadn't have joined this community, I wouldn't have done hardly anything. I would have probably carried on doing the job I was doing. I mean, I might have got married and had kids. But I got pushed out of my comfort zone. I got pushed in positions where I couldn't handle things, where I had to rely on God. I did most of the things that I did, you know, work-wise. I ended up working in one of the community businesses. I was always having to push my horizons. Left to my own devices, I wouldn't have developed into the person I am now, really. But you know, God used all that stuff to train me. That isn't to say that you know, looking back, I think, you know, there are things I wish had been done differently. So, but on a personal level, you know, God's really maxed out what I can give in my service because of some of the things that I went through. You know, some of the things that I was called upon to do. Yeah. Yeah, that's you know, staying within your comfort zone. That's where you're going to be, in your comfort zone. You know, you're never really going to be able to explore and you know, find the height of your calling. And that's the trouble with a lot of individual Christianity. You know, you're signing up not to challenge each other. And we were signed up to challenge each other. It was very uncomfortable. Sometimes it was a bit over the top, but you know, it was producing a character. And I'm really thankful for that.
I mean, I'm conscious of the time because I know some of these guys should have been at work 5 minutes ago. Some of them have been furloughed and stuff like that. But I just want to deal with those two things, or two things actually. So what does, or what can the Jesus Army teach the church? And I just want to say the Jesus Army has disbanded as a movement. I spoke to a friend, and he had he leads a multi-site church, and he had around 100 ex-Jesus Army people pass through his church, and he said, Steve, one thing I say about them, they did create great people. He said, look, they I don't know what they did or how they did it, but they discipled their people really well. Okay, so what things can we learn? You know, and then let's talk about what were some of the mistakes, like why did it disband? You know, and what were some of the mistakes that were made?
Okay. So you're wanting it was true. There were some great people created. Even some of the kids who grew up in the community, even though they didn't embrace the faith, some of them have gone on to be to do amazing stuff. It was terrific. Now, so how do you want me to kind of roll this out? Can you ask me another question to bring me back into focus?
I will do, guys. If you've got any questions, stick it in the comment section, and then we will try and address it. Particularly if you have any experience with the Jesus Army. I know Melissa said that she used to see you guys at Greenbelt. The Jesus Army did a lot of door-to-door, a lot of street work, a lot of stuff in festivals and stuff like that. And I was involved in all that. That's why you hardly ever see me at Christian conferences anymore, because I was all conferenced up and all conferenced out. But the questions were, what can the Jesus Army teach the church? What can the Jesus Army teach the church positively? Like, what are some of the things that she stood for and stuff that we can learn from? But what were some of the big mistakes that happened within the Jesus Army, and what are some of the warnings?
Yeah. Well, I think what the strength, the real strength of the church was our relationships with one another. We were encouraged to go deep into the relationships with one another, and they were forged sometimes in times of times of difficulty. So we were encouraged into relationships. On the minor side, women weren't really respected within the church. It was a big man focus, like you said, 50% male, and so women who were gifted, didn't get opportunities. And some of the guys who became leaders were a bit controlling.
Yeah,
I think there was I'd say that there was an absence of understanding the needs of different people, and being compassionate, especially after there became more organisation, and we spread out a lot. We had the businesses, but we lost the flexibility that we had, and that was things like that came back to bite us. A few years ago, the senior leadership of the church, the founder had passed away by then, the senior leadership of the church instigated a disclosure procedure, and allowed people to say, well, what's gone wrong? And that procedure was the start, really, of it was quite a quick decline. I'm shocked.
That was Mick, wasn't it?
That was
great. Great, love Mick. And very prophetic, though. Very, very prophetic. Willing to open yourself up to the criticism. I guess he didn't know where it would lead, but I guess it was a very, very bold action.
It was, and that was along with the fact that community was losing popularity. Like in 1990, there were 900 community residents in the UK, various people. Probably there's well under 200 now. And so that's the community carries on, of course, whilst the church is sort of winding itself up. but I've thought long and deeply about some of the things that were wrong.
What about
over
the safeguarding of children?
years.
The safeguarding of children, because that will be something which obviously people would have strong feelings about. How in some places, Abigail's saying about Mick Temp, such a lovely man. I remember after we had visited for a meal, he was mopping the floor. Yeah, he was the national leader. He didn't earn a salary in the Jesus Army. They didn't have salaries or a bank account, and so he was an all-in guy. And after dinner, he was mopping the floor. That's one thing I always learned from Mick. Mick was always like, "Don't help, Steve. Always be the first to help." And even now, in fact, I think we've got leaders in our church who I don't think they've ever made me a cup of coffee, and I'm always making them a cup of coffee, and that's down to Mick Haynes. But yeah, what about the safeguarding of children? And then we should really wrap it up. People would say that was a mistake, and I do think that the church grew far too quickly, and there were people in leadership which should not have been in leadership. But yeah, the safeguarding of children.
Well, obviously we got external safeguarders involved after the disclosure procedure, and some of the kind of we had some of the practices, the way we did things, like back in the 70s, in modern society, are just totally unacceptable. We're living in a different world, and so up until pretty recently, we had a family living with us in the house where we've just moved from the house in rented accommodation now, and the house has been sold. There's 5 of us. We were living with a family. It was Jono and Claire, and then Jono died.
Jono died. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, in 2015, and so there's Claire and the 2 boys. And we were living together. We were very close, but we had introduced by then safeguards about children. They were living in their own wing of the house. There was a failure to really keep up with all that stuff, and that was something that the senior leadership put right. But and unfortunately, all the children who grew up in community didn't come off unscathed, and that's something which is still being dealt with. I think I would say this, because you've got to go quite soon. Is that really Jesus is the centre of our faith, and not an institution. And we are restoring that balance. That real community lives in the heart of Jesus Christ, and our love to one another. And although that we had some marvellous times, and we really taught to express that love and service like you were talking about, at the end of the day, we can't be somebody else's conscience for them. And that is where I think now we're starting to restore the balance. Wanting to exercise a conscience, maybe to help somebody financially, and you find out, you've got to go through the procedure. And personally, I don't want to do that anymore. If I see somebody in need and I feel my heart stirred to give to them, I just want to do it.
Yeah, come on.
So there's massive pluses, but there's minuses, and the what we're learning now is that we don't want to throw the past away. We know there's been some mistakes, but what we do want to do is get closer to Jesus, and maybe on a more kind of more individual basis. I mean, we live together with other people, and we've decided to carry on doing that. But we're not insisting that everybody fits the same mold.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Bob says, I concur. I followed from afar and can sense the heart's simplicity, sincerity, and a wholesome fear of God. Nanette says, I love your servant heart, Steve. You're a model, a role model, I think she means. Nanette, hey, I love you too. And you're right, I do kind of look like a model. That may or may not be true. My wife is watching, so I better shut up. Just to close this out, the Jesus Army wrote a number of their own songs. In fact, there was a point in which they only sang their own songs, and songs which were like public domain hymns and stuff like that. One of the reasons that they did that, they were a bit anti the fact that worship had become kind of like a money-making enterprise. Not that it's not okay for a servant to get his bread, but it had. And some of those songs kind of just live with me in my memory. So it would be great, Barney, if you could quote one of the songs, which you guys used to call the Songs of Zion. If you could quote that over us, and then I will bring this live feed to an end.
Well, one of the songs that we used to sing was somebody had, it was a transcription of something that Watchman Nee had wrote.
I love Watchman Nee.
I don't know if you remember that one. It was called "Let Me Love Without Honor."
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
Let me serve without applause. Let me suffer no one knowing. Live for Jesus without praise. Let me walk without turning. Follow you mocked and betrayed. Pressing forward, hold the vision. Many pressures, no complaints.
Come on.
That was kind of that was, you know, that was the best of what the Jesus Army was.
Hallelujah. Barney, I better leave it there. Guys, I love you. Hopefully that's been helpful. And as we are moving towards Pentecost and we're exploring the fact that the Holy Spirit came and it fell upon the church, and as we've been kind of talking about revival, we've been praying for revival, we've been praying for refreshing and a renewal of the Spirit, as we've been kind of looking at the transformation of ourselves, but also the wider society, I think that there are some really, really valuable lessons that can be learned, some good and some bad, about the story of the Jesus Fellowship or Jesus Army. So God bless you guys. Have an absolutely awesome day. And sorry, we had to do it through a phone line. But hey, God, I'm sure, has given you something to think on today.